Okay. Well, here we go, man. I welcome you guys in show. We'll make this number 58. Jaguars play today, got the Brownies. The Jaguars got the Brownies at home, the Cleveland Browns. I remember going to a Browns game where the Jaguars beat the Browns. A backup quarterback could not throw a pass 10 or 15 yards for the Browns, and the Jaguars won that game back when Gus Bradley was the coach. Man, I think they won that game 24-6 or something like that. So here we are. I got the ticker of college football games on the scroll, at least some of them. I was trying to keep up with the Georgia game some after Florida got derailed by Texas A&M. Let's talk about the Florida game. We'll talk about the Georgia game. Georgia won, Florida lost. FSU went down again to Memphis. Memphis is a mid-major, right? And Coach Norvell used to coach there. Got some good coffee, football. I like a little barbecue too with football. Talking football, watching football, and eating barbecue. We're drinking coffee. We're kind of in the morning rendition of the Teal Shirt Report podcast. Episode show number 50A. 50A. 2024. We're new to YouTube. We're starting YouTube from the ground floor up. We got a ticker. If you're listening on the audio platforms, we got a ticker giving the college scores out. I can read them to you. Texas A&M 33, Florida 20. Final score, Florida's now 1-2. Florida with losses to Miami, win over Samford, and now the first conference game is a loss. Now, why is all this important, the first three games? Because when we looked at the schedule before the season, everybody said, man, I was the main guy. I said the last 5 games are murderer's row. Maybe not so much with Florida State at the end of the schedule now. But now at this juncture, at least 4 out of the last 5 are murderer's row. And maybe the Florida State team is not that bad. Maybe they caught teams playing very, very well. Because when you look at FSU, I mean, most of their games have been close. I mean, Georgia Tech got them by 3 points. Boston College did outplay them badly in Tallahassee by, 2 touchdowns Boston College won by. We're going to take a look at predominantly the majority of the college football scores. My Ed White Commanders in high school football beat Inglewood. That was a blowout. That was a rout, too. It just seems like my high school, Ed White, they are better, and they're probably going to make – I'm thinking Ed White will make the state playoffs this year. Maybe they go 6-4. Maybe they win 6-7 games at the tops. They got a tough schedule. They did lose to Trinity Christian 21-18 a couple of weeks back. But they blew Inglewood out, and they won a game before that. So Ed White is one of those high school teams where they're better. They're better than some. They're better than some teams, but Ed White's just not up there with the elite teams in high school football yet. That's how you kind of build a program. I'm not saying Ed White's ever going to be elite. I know when I went to school there, I think the best record we had at Ed White was maybe 8-2, but Ed White could never beat Corky Rogers, the famous league coach that went on to coach at Bowles. College football, Texas A&M 33, Florida 20. Both quarterbacks played some, but it was not a good offensive output. There's problems with Florida. There's problems with route running through the first 3 games. There's big problems with the defense. I don't think Florida's had a good defense in almost 4 years now. I think they've been average to below average to poor. And that might be saying it best. Average, but mainly below average to poor is how I would rate the Florida Gator defense the last almost 4 years now. And that probably includes the last year Dan Mullen was at Florida too. So Texas A&M beats Florida 33-20, the final. Florida's now 1-2. At halftime, Texas A&M's got this 20-0 halftime lead. Billy Napier runs off the field, and man, the fans are booing him at Florida Field in Gainesville. I mean, you're talking about a rabid fans at the University of Florida. They all want him out. They all want him out there. He's 1-2. Now, here's the thing. It's kind of hard to defend Billy Napier at all, even to an extent I want to. He finally got his quarterback, who's a true freshman. Let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind that DJ Lagway is a true freshman. Graham Mertz is still playing. You got two pretty decent quarterbacks. But there's not really – Florida's got a couple of guys that are playmakers on offense, but not really one guy. There's no Emmitt Smith on the team. There's no Riedel Anthony, Ike Hilliard. There's none of them guys. And in the second half, if you're waiting for Danny Werfel to come off the bench and beat Kentucky, there's none of that. There's none of that. You got, I hate to say it, those days are in the rear view, but man, I love those days. The fans want those days to continue, but it doesn't always work out like that. You got an SEC that's got 16 teams in it, including Texas, Oklahoma now. Texas A&M is a relatively newcomer to the SEC. How long has A&M been in the SEC? 10 years or more or so? Texas A&M 33, Florida 20. The final, Texas A&M was leading. Were they leading 20-0 at halftime? And then Florida finally scored in the third quarter, and it was 20-7. Gators battled back some, but Texas A&M was jacked up, and they were playing with the backup quarterback, who actually, I believe, played in a bowl game for Texas A&M. Was it last year, I believe? So he's played before. Texas A&M 33, Florida 20. Gators now 1-2. They got routed by Miami 41-17. They did blow out Samford. Everybody expected them to beat Samford fairly soundly. Samford's a mid-major at best. Texas A&M 33, Florida 20. That about says it all. In Gainesville with Tom Petty. With the Tom Petty song playing in between the third and fourth quarter, and the fans probably starting to leave the stadium then. There's going to be a change in Gainesville. Here's the problem. Before the season started, I was saying, hey, man, Billy Napier can keep his job if he wins 7 games or more. That's not going to happen now because these are the games he had to win early in the year. The first 7 games were doable, and now Billy Napier's 1-2, going to Starkville if he gets that far. So I asked a good Gator fan, I said, well, my opinion is this. If he loses at Mississippi State, he's probably fired on the spot. Then I had this really good friend of mine, big Gator fan. He told me, Billy might not make it to Starkville because there's going to be meetings this week is what I'm hearing concerning the Florida Gator football program. Florida starts out 1-2. If they were 2-1, I think he'd be okay for the moment. But 1-2, and you don't beat Miami, you don't beat Texas A&M, both home games, mind you. You get a win over Samford. Now, Billy Napier come from Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, where they were used to beating teams like Samford by a few points, but Napier didn't have to go up against the Texas A&Ms, the Miami of Floridas. And, Mississippi State is considered rock bottom of the SEC, but they got a pretty efficient and good offense is what I'm hearing. College football scores Texas A&M 33, Florida 20, the final. Memphis 20, FSU 12, the final. FSU starts 0-3. They've started worse than Florida, although their scores are a little bit more respectable. Georgia went up to Kentucky, and that's a hornet's nest. If Kentucky gets into the game, Georgia won 13-12, final. Alabama blew out Wisconsin 42-10. Bama, I think, I watched some of that game, It was a 16-point spread, and I picked Wisconsin. That was an awful mistake. I should have learned. I should have learned my lessons about Alabama years ago. Now, Alabama had a coach named Gene Stallings. His first year at Bama, he started out 0-3, but then he won a national championship like what, a year or two later. You got to bounce back. If Billy gets a chance to coach at Mississippi State, he's got to bounce back. If the Gators fire him this week, next week, or whenever, and they inevitably will, they're going to pay him a lot of money. He's got a 7-year contract. This is only his 3rd year. He's going to make millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars, like Dan Mullen did. How many coaches can you go through? Canned McElwain. You remember Jim McElwain? He was a pretty good coach. He won a couple of SEC Eastern Division titles. But then there were issues with Jim, and he became Canned McElwain. The problem is this: Florida's going through a lot of coaches now. And every time you make a change like this, man, it takes the program down deeper in the ditch, right? Texas A&M 33, Florida 20 a final. Memphis 20, FSU 12. FSU is now 0-3 after losses to Georgia Tech, Boston College, and now Memphis. I mean, FSU hadn't played Clemson yet. They haven't played North Carolina. I'm assuming both. I know Clemson's on the schedule. Unbelievable. Norvell will not be fired because he's coming off a year last year where he finished in the top 10 of college football. I mean, FSU lost the bowl game. They got upset they didn't make the playoff. And now FSU lost the last game last year. Although they won them all, FSU was 11-0, 12-0. Then they lost the bowl game. Everybody was up in arms about they should have been in the playoff. And well, if last year had been this year, they would have been in the playoff with 12 teams. I can tell you right now, the playoffs, there's 4 teams that should be in the playoffs. And I'll tell you who they are right now: Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State. Those are 4 teams. If we talk about a 5th team, I didn't see how Oregon finished, but they're probably the 5th team. Notre Dame's already been beaten by Northern Illinois. Playoffs? Well, the Notre Dame people are talking like they win the rest of the games, they should be in the playoff, and they probably will be. College football, man, it's a wreck. It's more of a wreck than Gilligan's Island ever was. The shipwrecked boat. What was it? The SS Minnow. If not for the courage of the fearless ship, college football would be lost. well, college football is owned by the 4-letter network now. And if you're Gator fans, you can be frustrated. You can hate the losses, be upset and mad about the losses, which Gator fans are. I've been a Gator fan since 1970. You'd much rather be 3-0 than 1-2. What was it that Democratic strategist Jim Carvell said, an LSU fan? He said, "You're not a college football fan if your team loses and you can read the Sunday paper." I thought that was such a cool line because I felt like that as a kid. When Florida lost, man, I didn't want to see that Sunday paper. When they won, boy, you wanted to see it. That's football. Alabama 42, Wisconsin 10. Alabama just too much speed on Saturday, September the 14th of 2024. Those are some of the scores. Auburn smoked the New Mexico Lobos, but they lost to California by a touchdown the week before. Auburn beat Alabama A&M. Auburn's 2-1. But and Auburn, they make it better and better as the year goes along with Coach Hugh Freeze. We've talked a lot of college football. Jaguars need a win badly. They do. And when I talked about the top 4 teams of college football, 3 of them we got in the SEC: Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. And what about Ole Miss? Then you got Ole Miss and probably Oregon after that. My goodness. There's going to be a lot of conference games that'll knock some people out, though. The SEC's tough, Big Ten's tough. Indiana looks like a pretty good football team. They blew out UCLA. They got a new coach. The guy that, where was he at? James Madison. Indiana looks like they could be a Cinderella team in the Big Ten. We'll see how it goes. Michigan won by 10 points over Arkansas State. That's not real impressive, but they got to win. Oh, man, talking about the Jaguars at home. And, you know, Buffalo beat Miami. Blew out Miami. Blew out the Dolphins on, what was it, Thursday Night Football. Cook, who I've got on my fantasy team, scored a couple of touchdowns. His name James Cook. He got 2 touchdowns in that game. That helped me with one of my fantasy football leagues. Jaguars versus Browns. We will take a look at the line. And in one league, I traded Patrick Mahomes to get Jamar Chase. I picked up the Bears rookie quarterback, and then I got rid of one of my backup wide receivers because the guy that I traded with, he had Jordan Love go down. He wanted Mahomes. I told him I'd trade him Trevor Lawrence or Mahomes. He wanted Mahomes, obviously. Mahomes is normally set to score more points than Trevor, but now Trevor was a higher draft pick than Patrick Mahomes. It's time for Trevor to start playing. So I'm going to start Trevor in this WFL fantasy football league I'm in. Take a look at the Browns and Jaguar game. Take a look at a line we've got on the game. Let's see. Jaguars should be favored today at 1:00. Game's on CBS. Jaguars 0-1. Brownies 0-1. They got blown out by Dallas the first week, but they got a good defense overall. Let's take a look. See if I can find a line. I think the Jags are favored. I think the Jaguars are going to be favored in this game. Let's take a look. When you pull stuff up online, you have to be careful you're pulling up the right year. And Jaguars and Browns today on Monday, September 15th of 2024. Let's take a look. Jaguars are going to be favored in this game. Let's take a look. I think kickoffs at 1:00. I know some people go into the game. I will be at World Headquarters watching it from my special monitor. Let's take a look. Jaguars are basically a 3-point favorite in this game, if I'm seeing that right. Over under 41.5. I'm not picking this game. Boy, I did pick Florida and a couple of social media sites to beat Texas A&M. Man, what was I thinking? Texas A&M was jacked up. They were more jacked up than Florida. Texas A&M wanted the game more. And that reverts the coaching. Jaguars a 3-point favorite at home. Jaguars better win this game, and I'll tell you why, because next week they got Buffalo on Monday Night Football. So I just think Trevor Lawrence and the wide receivers, I don't know what happened with Brian Thomas Jr. in the second half. Seemed like what people are telling me, the Jaguars didn't really throw to him in the second half after he got a first half touchdown. Coach Doug Peterson better grab the reins on this play calling. When ETN hits the 5 or 6 yard line, he needs to become Larry Zonka, 2 hands on the ball. And that's not the type of running back he is. He's a guy darting and dashing, so you can't totally blame him. The guy in the first game for Miami just hit the ball, got the fat part of the ball, struck it with enough force, knocked it out of ETN's hands at the 5 or 6 yard line. The ball went down and then just basically ricocheted off his shin, went into the end zone. Miami grabbed the ball deep in the end zone. And that was a huge turning point in a game. The Jaguars at one time had a 14-0 lead, and they end up losing that game. What was it, 20-17? Week one. I've almost put week one in the rear view because I had expected Miami to win that game down in Miami. My thought was the Jaguars would start 1-2 and then get better in the second half of the year. Schedule's a little bit better in the second half of the year from what I can tell. But things change in the NFL. Some teams get better as the year goes along. Some teams fall apart with injuries, etc. And drama, injuries, losing streaks, bad officiating sometimes comes into play, as most of us know. Most of us know. Jacksonville, man, they're lucky to have a team. Is that what they say behind closed doors in the NFL? Well, the national media, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, back in 93 when Touchdown Jacksonville and Jacksonville, Florida was chasing an NFL team, they said Jacksonville will never get an NFL team. But we did. And there was even a video narrated by, what was the guy's name that passed away? James Earl Jones the other day. Yeah, that was kind of sad. He had a long life though, and he was a good guy. James Earl Jones was 93 when he passed away back on September the 9th of 2024. When the Jaguars were putting together, basically, they were putting together a video and all the reasons why Jacksonville should have an NFL team. There was a video, and he voiced the video, James Earl Jones. Sadly, he passed away just a few days ago. So he was a part of Jacksonville getting an NFL team. Wayne Weaver the former owner, was probably the biggest part. So you're tuned into the Teal Shirt Report podcast. Jaguars a 3-point favorite. I would never say the Jaguars are covering this game. Browns got a good defense. It's time for the offense to come to play. Like I say, in one league, I've got Patrick Mahomes in another league, but in one league, I traded Patrick. I'm sliding Trevor Lawrence, and there's my starter in a fantasy league. It's time for Trevor they got to take the training wheels off. I'm not saying there were training wheels on Trevor, but Trevor's getting a huge contract. He's going to be in Duval for a decade. That's already been decided. Unless you cut him or trade him or what. That's a big contract he's running into now after his rookie deal. Trevor has got to take the reins of the offense. The guy, and I'm going to say this again, people were saying, ETN fumbled inside the 10. Well, yeah, I don't really think ETN fumbled. I mean, the Miami guy made a play. He hit the fat part of the ball, happened to just catch it at the right time, the right amount of force, and he punched the ball out. That's what happened in the Miami game. Jaguars lost 20-17. And when your defense only gives up 20 points, you should have won that game, right? Probably. Miami had a lot of speed. Cleveland's got a good defense coming into Jacksonville. If the Jaguars lose to the Browns at home, they're probably going to start 0-3 because then they got to go to Buffalo. And I guess they'll be thinking they're backed up against the wall. This is almost early in the year. This is kind of a must win at home against the Cleveland Browns. It's early in the year, though. But we'll see what happens. I'm not picking this game. I picked Florida to beat Texas A&M. I thought Florida would handle them, play some defense. I thought Florida was going to win the game about 24-16. And then you look at the ticker, and Texas A&M puts 33 on the Gators, 20 by the end of the first half. The fans are booing Napier as he runs into the locker room at halftime. Florida down 20-0. Florida finally scores. They score 7 points early in the mid-third quarter, and they got it within 20-7. And you're thinking, well, maybe something will happen. Maybe Danny Werfel will come off the bench like he did against Kentucky years ago. Danny Werfel hasn't played college football in many, many years. He was really a good player. In the first game he played, he engineered a comeback against Kentucky, where the Gators came from behind and won the game when he was a freshman. College football scores: Texas A&M 33, Florida 20, a final Memphis 20, FSU 12. FSU's 0-3, Gators are 1-2. Georgia hanging in there. I mean, Georgia's still one of the top 4 teams in the country, but they ran into a hornet's nest up in Kentucky. You let Kentucky get in the game, let that crowd get in the game, anything can happen, but a good football team will come out of there with a win in the fourth quarter. And Coach Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs did. Georgia Bulldogs 13, Kentucky 12. Kentucky had them on the hook, though. Alabama 42, Wisconsin 10. So we'll be doing a new SEC. We really need to get to our SEC Power Rankings, BigJReport.com, SEC Power Rankings. We'll put one of those together in the next day or two. Alabama's moving up. Was that game on the road at Wisconsin and they won 42-10? Alabama looks tough. They got speed and they got a new coach, but he's won everywhere he's been. DeBoer. I really like this story that former Alabama running back Mark Ingram was on the TV broadcast. I guess it was at Fox Sports he works for. He went up to Wisconsin and had a chance to take kind of a field trip to Wisconsin hockey, where they've won championships at the Wisconsin Badgers hockey team. Very, very successful in hockey. Mark Ingram. I don't think he ever ice skated in his life before, man. He got where he could do it. Ice skate, slap shots with hockey sticks. Checking looked like it was a little difficult, but looked like he had a real good time. And I thought that was a cool story. Mark Ingram switching over to hockey. But what's going to happen at Florida? Do we need to talk about what happens next? A good friend of mine, big Gator fan, says he's not sure Napier will make it to Starkville. I told him, hey, if Napier loses at Mississippi State, they're going to fire him on the spot. My friend said he may not make it to Starkville. Florida Gators, the people in the know are going to have meetings this week. My name is Scott with BigJReport.com, the Teal Shirt Report podcast, show number 58. Brought to you by Saucer Realty and Capital, Larry Saucer. We know him for your real estate needs in North Florida and surrounding areas, whether it's home, residential, business, or commercial real estate. You'll find the link for Saucer Realty and Capital on our homepage, right near our weather report at BigJReport.com. I want to thank Lake Eufaula Hits. JC does a show on Thursday nights live in the pub. Thursday nights at LakeEufaulaHits.com. Great internet radio where it's all good. Mad Max was on his show, I guess it was last Wednesday night. Max playing requests for me and everybody. Atlanta Rhythm Section, Steely Dan, Pink Floyd. I get a good opportunity to be interviewed by Max on his show, and there's other people that come on too. It's a great show. Wednesday nights, 6 to 8 Central Time, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock Eastern Time at the Mad Max Mix.weebly.com. We're eloquently produced by our executive producer, JC, another producer, Alex Nunnery, and I want to thank our correspondent of our podcast, our correspondent and contributor, John Gaylor. Thank you so much, John. I talk a lot of football with John, message with John over the weekend. Talked to JC over the week, our executive producer. Where does he go next with the Florida Gators? Man, there's a lot of rumors. Lane Kiffin. Maybe Urban comes back. My executive producer saying, hey, Urban's on the phone with him now, talking to him, trying to come back. Urban wants to coach again, right? I think Urban would be okay for a year or two. And then you bring in the young guy, the right one, right? You pick a guy that doesn't win games, whoever picked him or hired him, they're in a lot of trouble too. It's kind of the way it goes, right? Norvell is safe at Florida State. He had a good year last year. What was Florida State? 12-1. They finished in the top 10. Norvell's lost some close games early. Florida State lost a lot of players to the NFL. They're not the same team they were last year, but I think Norvell's a good coach, and he'll get that thing right at FSU. The Florida FSU game will be interesting this year. Is Napier still coaching Florida when Florida plays FSU? Man, what's the chances of that? Man, the Florida people in the know are going to have the meeting this week, and Napier could be out sooner than later. My name's Scott. This has been the Teal Shirt Report podcast. I'm your host. Jags are actually hanging by a thread, a 3-point favorite over the Brownies, the Cleveland Browns, on Sunday afternoon, September the 15th. I'm not picking this one, but the Jaguars offense has got to come to play. I was fairly impressed with the Jags defense against Miami. This is a game the defense has got to play well, like they did against Miami. And they may need to grab a turnover or two this week to win the game. But I think the game is going to be won with the offense. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence, the offensive line has got to come to play. Looked like Trevor played pretty well when he had a clean pocket. That offensive line has got to protect, and the Jaguars got to run the ball. Turnovers are going to be huge, but the Jaguars are a 3-point favorite in this game today as we record this podcast on Sunday, September the 15th of 2024. Special thanks to our sponsors, Salsa Realty and Capital, Lakey Paula Hits, where JC does the live from the pub show on Thursday nights, and the Mad Max Mix.weebly.com. Max has a mega show. I listen every Wednesday. Max plays songs for me, and he'll play songs for you too. Check him out at the Mad Max Mix.weebly.com. That's going to do it for the Teal Shirt Report podcast. Episode show number 58. We'll try to find, John Gaylor had got me a couple of guys that wore 49 and 50. We'll have to update that on the next podcast, which would actually be 50B, right? I guess we'll be back again when the Jaguars game is in the books. You guys have a great Sunday, man. Go Jags. They're at home. Duval. I'm Scott, your host of the Teal Shirt Report podcast. Hey, have a great day.